Hello everyone and welcome to this video. I'm Grandmaster Erwin, and together with International Master Robert Ris, we're going to have a look at Game 7 of the World Chess Championship between Magnus Carlsen, the reigning world champion, and his challenger Giri and Radjabov. For the more regular viewers of this video series, you may have noticed that there has been no recap of game number 5 and game number 6. That's because yours truly has played a tournament himself the past weekend, so I haven't had the opportunity to make a video of that together with Robert Ris. But a lot has happened, Robbie. Can you update us on the recent developments in the match?
Yeah, actually Magnus took the lead in the match. He won game 6 with playing with the white pieces, and it was a very interesting game because something very unusual happened as both players just overlooked a very simple tactic.
Right.
It was just in Magnus' favor because Anand didn't spot it, so Magnus was pressing almost the entire game. Yeah. He deserved to win, but it could have been the other way around, and it could have ended in Vishy's favor. So, right. Yeah, very interesting development. And
a lot has been said about that blunder. Do you think it would have changed the outcome of the match entirely?
Well, it's always difficult to say, in my opinion.
Yeah, but I want some big comments from you now, of course.
Yeah. Okay, you're expecting something.
I'm
yeah,
expecting
but
something. Yeah.
It would have been would have been a big surprise if Vishy would have taken the lead, halfway. Yeah. And okay, Magnus
winning a game with black, I mean, would have been huge, yeah.
With black even, yeah. So now it's Magnus just having a comfortable lead, and he is getting in game 7. We are going to examine right now. He is getting again the white pieces because they are turning the colors halfway.
Right, that's important to note, yeah, that after game 6 they are halfway in the match, so one of them doubles the color to make that, well, somebody figured that is a more fair way of doing things. I don't really know why, but there must be some kind of mathematical reason for that. I guess.
So actually, it could be a big blow for Vishy if Carlsen manages to press the entire game again, and yeah,
because so far we've seen that both players are actually suffering with black, yeah? I think we can conclude that.
Yeah, because until this game it was Magnus was 2.5 out of 3 from his white games, and he has been pressing all games. So it's apparently a very difficult task to play the other with the black pieces, and I think this game wasn't a different story.
Yeah, today. Well, let's get into the game. Yeah, I think it's just today we saw Vishy returning to what he did in the second game. So he played again the Berlin Wall. Any thoughts on that before we continue? Or I mean, him returning to the Sicilian. I mean,
yeah, actually,
returning from the Sicilian. Sorry.
Yeah, it was a bit of surprise for me because I thought he would just abandon the Berlin for the entire match. But okay, generally there's nothing wrong with the Berlin itself, and apparently he would like to consolidate with black, satisfy himself with the draw, and try to bounce back later on with the white pieces. So right. I think that's his strategy.
Right. Let's see. Carlsen didn't play d3 as he did in game 2. He castled, so he allowed the Berlin endgame. And now, well, I think we can go through all of these moves fairly quickly because it's been seen in a number of games. Well, hundreds of games, I should say, h3. And Vishy chooses the very topical move King e8. It's interesting to note that Magnus himself played, I think, Bishop d7 against Vishy in Chennai. Am I mistaken or not?
I think you know the Berlin better than me.
Yeah, okay, if it's not the case, then I'm pretty sure he played Bishop d7 against Vishy in Chennai. But King e8 is a perfectly reasonable option as well. After knight g3 h5, this line has also done very well for black in practice. Like I said, I mean, maybe we shouldn't spend too much time on this because there have been a huge number of top-level games here, heavy theory, and
especially recently there have been a couple of elite games in the Grand Prix tournaments, also in Sinkfield Cup, if I'm not mistaken. And this is just it's actually a kind of solid line for black. Yeah, he's trying to establish a blockade on the king side. And in many lines we will get opposite colored bishops after swapping the dark squared bishop for the knight.
Right.
on g5.
That's what exactly happened. The players, they were following a recent game of Anish Giri against Radjabov in the latest Tashkent Grand Prix. But all of this had been seen long before, so I just want to pass this over relatively quickly. F3. For people who have never played this line, it seems rather odd that already deep into the endgame, all these moves have been analyzed. And Rook d8, King f2 was Anish's idea, I believe. Knight takes d1, Knight f5, all seen before. So the idea is, just to quickly point out that although Black has an extra pawn, he is also suffering from quite a few weaknesses, one of which is this extra pawn on c7. And White is hoping that by having the slightly better piece arrangement, he can sort of pressure Black here. In practice though, I checked today because of course in preparation for the video, and also I was curious to see how White is doing in practice, and actually nobody ever lost this position with Black. So
incredible.
That's interesting to note maybe. The game still continued in like was played before. Bishop takes a2, Rook takes h5, Bishop e6 back, g4. Yeah, the way theory progresses these days is kind of difficult to fathom. Rook h7, and here was the first moment that Vichy really started to think, which was surprising to me a bit, because they're still following this recent game of Anish Giri against Radjabov. I think that Radjabov played here the move f5.
Which looks a little bit suspicious itself, because you leave the pawn on c7.
Yes, yeah, and that's actually the instinct that happened is that Anish didn't take on c7. But today I read on Twitter that in the press conference after the game, they both said that actually Rook c7, Knight b5, and if I'm not mistaken, now the intermezzo g takes f5 would have been very unpleasant for Black, because after Bishop takes f5, Rook takes b7, Bishop takes c2, you go Knight e3, and although the material is equal, White is really pressing hard, because the Knight is coming to g4, maybe to e5, the King is a bit weak, c6 and a7 are weak. It's a very unpleasant position actually.
True.
So Vichy probably knew this and played Knight f7 instead. To which, oh, I should mention, by the way, sorry, before we continue, that Bishop d7 I thought was an interesting option as well. Simply with the idea of saying, well, how are you going to continue? I don't really see it. Knight e3, f5, like Magnus played in the game, is not possible here. And Black simply is going to push his pawns and just already prepare some kind of break on the queen side. I think Black's position is very solid.
Yeah, and actually compared to the game, Knight f7 was played.
Right.
And Magnus found some very nice regrouping of it.
I was really worried for Vichy's position, because as Knight e3, King d8, it's the game. Knight f5. I mean, Black seems really tied up here. It's really.
Yeah, you cannot take the knight, because the knight on f7 will be.
That's of course an important point to make. After g takes f5, we're attacking the rook, and if you remove that rook to, let's say, g8, I seem to have some technical difficulties, but I hope you get the point. After the rook is removed from g6, the knight will be lost. So c5 was played. And the thing is that Magnus was still blitzing his moves here.
Yeah, it's quite a scary thought. Yeah, even a player like Magnus, we have been not blaming, but we have been punishing him a little bit for his laziness in his opening approach. But even in this kind of endgames, he knows what he is doing. He has seen it before. He has some ideas, and
but
probably.
Don't you think it's, sorry to interrupt, but don't you think it's really difficult for Vichy now, because he probably didn't even expect this endgame to appear, because he thought that Magnus will again play some sideline, something, and suddenly now he has to be ready for both the main lines and, on the other hand, the so-called sidelines.
Yeah, this is definitely this has been prepared by Magnus before the match, that in the earlier stage he will go for the move d3 on move 4, and later he will switch to this endgame. I think this has been anticipated, and it's just with the aim to confuse the opponent. And
yeah, I think it's working. I think it's working well.
Very interesting.
So Magnus played knight g3 here instantly. which is a very nice little maneuver. We should point out that, well, Vichy played here knight e5, which was a huge decision, and we will get into that very soon. But it's important to point out that this typical maneuver, rook g8, in order to exchange the rooks, it probably is refuted here by bishop d2, rook h8, an exchange of rooks, and now bishop c3.
Threatening to take on f6, and if you protect it with king e7.
Right, this is a very serious pin, so you cannot move. And after king e7, the move g5 actually wins it. Again, making use of the pin on the knight.
Yeah, I like this subtle maneuvering. First with the knight has been improved to g3, and then bishop retreats to d2 to c3. It's very small, subtle play by white.
This kind of this feeling for coordination for I cannot find the English word now, but I think you get what I mean. It's typical for Magnus' kind of play. He really gets the optimum out of his pieces generally.
He is finding harmony for his
harmony. That's the word I was looking for exactly. So knight e5 is what Vichy played.
But it's a very key decision, yeah?
Yeah, this was a really big decision, because basically he's saying I'm going in for an endgame of 4 pawns against 2 pawns on the queen side, and you have an extra knight, but I think I'm making a draw. Pretty heavy decision, if you ask me, just out of the opening. And it kind of made me wonder if he maybe hadn't thoroughly studied this game Giri Radjabov, because I doubt that if you study this position carefully, you would go for such a, well, let's say, a heavy decision, because it may just be lost, of course.
Yeah, I think he spent quite some time here, but
yeah, he spent like half an hour here. Yeah.
And what did Magnus play here?
He included the check, which I think makes sense, because if you take immediately, that's quite important. Magnus pointed it out in the press conference after rook h5. You can play bishop a2 here, very interesting.
I think it's a very funny move, actually, bishop a2.
Yeah, I was shocked that he pointed it out, actually, because the computer also says this. But then when you see such moves, you say, okay, but these are only things that computers can find. But actually, he himself pointed out that after rook e5, rook b6, black has strong counterplay on the queen side, and he's probably completely right.
Yeah, it's a very nice maneuver. I like it very much, because just a couple of moves ago, he took the pawn on a2, and now he puts it back on a2. Right. It's usually a square. You don't want to put your bishop. Yeah, I mean, we all remember the famous Fischer-Spassky game.
Of course.
Where Fischer took with his black bishop on h2 and lost the first.
We have the modern equivalent from Chennai, where Carlsen took on a2 a pawn as well.
In Berlin,
it was actually good there, contrary to the game of Fischer. Yeah. To avoid this, Magnus gave a check on h8 first, forcing rook g8, and only now he took on e5, making use of the fact that this runs into the pretty bishop takes f6, so some nice geometry there. F takes e5, and now he plays rook h5. Now, of course, this whole thing on the 6th rank is no longer there. And this is what I meant before. Here is where Vichy played bishop g4, f takes g4, rook takes g4, rook takes e5.
Actually, this sacrifice on g4 was not entirely forced. He could have played a bit different, I think. Okay. But it's very tricky. He could have perhaps played the move rook to f8.
Aha, I see. Okay. And if I go king e3?
Yeah, and then the idea, I think, was to play a bishop to d5.
Okay.
And now knight
e4.
Yeah, and there was some discussion about bishop takes e4, king takes,
rook f4 check.
Rook f4, yes, and
e3. I think I was checking this during the game, yeah, but I thought it's a very risky rook endgame.
Yeah, and actually both players they had been considering it during the game as well, but they
like this maybe.
Yeah, something like this, but Vichy felt that white was way faster anyway.
Yeah, I mean, just if we make a few more moves, like rook e5, rook b2, rook c5, I would say, well, this is just much faster.
Yeah, sure. It's not something you can calculate, but it's just a feeling that white is much.
No, then I definitely prefer what Vichy did.
I like this decision, at least from a practical point of view, and also Magnus he praised Vichy for his decision.
I see. Okay. Yeah, I think it was. It turned out he was correct. what was your first instinct when you saw the position? Did you think it was a win after b6, or what?
Well,
Objectively, I mean, practically it's a different story always, but.
It's very hard to assess, I think. But the thing is that Black, he should try to eliminate this 2 pawns, this pawn on b2 and c2.
Right.
If he managed to trade them off, then it's a draw. Rook against knight. Rook and knight versus rook is a theoretically drawn position.
I have a nice experience with that against Carlsen.
Against who? Against Magnus, yeah. Sorry
yeah,
to.
For the viewers at home, don't look that game up, yeah. Yeah.
So okay, generally it's a draw, and it's not so easy to make progress. I mean, Magnus tried really hard to improve his pieces, but I wasn't really sure during the game he would succeed, and finally he didn't succeed at all. So actually, I thought it's a draw, but I think a lot of players would still give White the better chances here.
I took some time to study this position during the day, and we can try to make a few. My moves, they will not be completely forced, but I will try to illustrate some ideas. Let's say. So let's say if I get my, I'm gonna make some cooperative moves, of course, for Black now. Let's say I'm getting something along the lines of this. I'm just making some moves. I'm bringing my king already a bit close. If I can exchange, for example, rooks like this. Rook e7, knight e7, then I should be quite easily winning with the knight versus the pawns, because the pawn breaks here are not that easy to make, and White will always keep one of those pawns, and then the endgame should be quite a trivial win actually.
Yeah, you just make sure that if Black plays a move like b5, you just allow him to take on c4. You don't respond.
Right.
So you keep always at least one pawn with.
Right, and I think this is also what both players mentioned in the press conference, that this was something that Magnus was aiming for, and Vichy was trying to stop. And we see it in the game. We should mention that at this point, Magnus also started to try to keep the game going as long as possible. Of course, he's trying to wear his opponent out, so to speak. So the next few moves, they were not always that critical. He was just marking time, so to speak.
Yeah, and there's just to make sure there's absolutely nothing to risk playing on with White.
Of course, yeah.
And you can just try, and you have a draw in hand, but you can try, and who knows that your opponent makes a mistake later on.
Exactly, and here you see that Anand, he stops this plan for Black by stopping the move knight d5, and by doing so, he is forcing Magnus, and Magnus will do so. I'm going a bit fast because they're just marking time at this point, but I just want to point out that only after White played c4, White can really establish a knight on d5, and Vichy wanted to make sure to force that move, because once that pawn is on c4, he can now start actively exchanging those pawns. Not right away, of course, but that's a big point to make. And well, sorry, at this point, the plan which we just described is about to get in motion. So knight c3, knight d5, rook e7 would be winning for White.
So it's now time to do something.
Yeah, you can. So Vichy, I think he's completely right. I mean, he knows that at this point he has to move either b5 or c6. He has to do something. C6 is bad here, but b5 he has to go, I think. Knight c3, c6. So now he changes his defense. Now that the pawn is on c4, he places his own pawns like this, puts his king on b6, tries to pressure a bit on c4, and Magnus tried for a very, very long time, but I think it's just drawn, yeah?
Yeah, I didn't see anything during the game, and I liked Vichy's play. I think he played quite accurately.
Yeah, I think there was just one more critical moment in the game, actually. We can just go there. And that was right here, because now it gets a little bit forcing, eh? This particular position. So Magnus managed to get the king to a5, also attacking the pawn on c5. And for example, in this particular position, I think if you go king b4,
you take on b5, right?
Take on b5 might be tricky. I can imagine that this, because something like this would of course not be in our favor.
True. Yeah, no, I like Fishy's play instead.
Right, and Fishy just continue checking, which is the most natural. Continue to check to get the king as far away as possible. And now he made a very strong decision, I think. Because again, if you go king b4, I think we're taking on b5. And if the king b5, we can even play something like rook e8, I think.
Yeah, and the problem is you cannot win the b3 pawn, yeah, probably, because the rook comes to b8 and the pawn on c5 will be hanging.
Yeah, I think this is already very, very dangerous. So he took on c4, which looks very anti-positional. But he calculated very precisely that if the rook takes c4, rook g3, knight takes c5, king b5. Now he is just in time to eliminate all the pawns, because the threat is already to take on b3 and afterwards on c4. And so white has to play rook c2, a5. And again, I'll go through this relatively quickly just to illustrate how the game proceeded.
Yeah, the problem is for white that he cannot move his knight and rook, because otherwise the b3 pawn...
Yeah, they're completely stuck defending this b3 pawn, exactly. And, well, rook c3, knight d3 check, king takes b3, eliminated the last pawn. And now, okay, just with knight and rook, it's impossible to... well, normally speaking, it's impossible to win here. And... well, the players, they continued for quite a bit. I think I'm going to scroll just right down to the end of the game. And on move 122, they exchanged the rooks finally, and the game was drawn. Well, for who feels better at this point, you think, after this game?
After this game, I think it's a very easy answer. I think Fishy will be very relieved, having survived a game with black. But okay, still, he needs to prove something. But okay, in the remaining part, there are still 5 games. And he has 3 whites. So he will definitely put some pressure on Magnus. And I think tomorrow we will see some, maybe not fireworks, but we will see some, some pressure.
We'll see pressing probably tomorrow, yeah. I completely agree. And also, I mean, today he was clearly the one who was worse prepared than his opponent. But he took a good practical decision, sacrificing the bishop on g4, making the draw afterwards, remaining cool. And I agree with you. Before the match, if you would have asked me, I wouldn't have thought it would be this close. And right now, actually, I honestly believe that anything can happen this match. 3 white still. Magnus has had big trouble with black in all of his games. So
yeah, but okay, still everything is possible. I agree. I think Fishy is doing reasonably well, considering the strength of both players and the match history.
Right.
But on the other hand, if we should pick a situation to take Magnus' position or Fishy's position, I think everybody will take Magnus' position. He's leading, and okay, Fishy needs to prove something. So everything is possible.
Yeah, of course he's a point ahead, but still anything to play for. I think we will be back tomorrow, won't we, for game 8, I should say. And I want to thank you for another video, and I want to thank the viewers. Do you have some final words for us?
Final words. Thanks for watching. Thanks to Erwin for doing this show with you, and I think we will see definitely some more action. I think it's a great match so far. And for us as chess fans, we have been treated very well by these players with a lot of excitement. So what else to say?
Looking forward to tomorrow. Thank you, everyone, and thank you for watching. Bye-bye.